Thank you all for coming. Very excited to be hosting now our second ever Unstuck and on Target coaching session for this project, though we have done it for other projects, but not this one. This one is brand new, fresh off the presses. I'm Laura Anthony, and I'm in Colorado, and I'm one of the researchers on this project and one of the Unstuck authors. I am also a psychologist and see patients as well. And maybe Monica, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Monica Werner, and I am in Maryland, so East Coast representation here. And I have a background, I'm a counselor, but I worked for 12 years in a school, so which is where we started Unstuck and On Target, started piloting it with the students in my school. And I'm really glad you're here, and I'm really appreciative you have your cameras on. It's nice to see faces.
That's really nice. Thank you so much. So one of the things we're going to be talking about is, Omicron in general, as one great, big, unexpected event, right? And it's not even the great bigness anymore. It's the day-to-day, hour-to-hour, where things are just happening that are unexpected for all of us. But with that uncertainty can come a lot of anxiety, both for us as professionals, for us as parents, for those of us who are parents, and also for our students in school. We are having just so much variability. So one of the things that we wanted to highlight, and you're going to be hearing about throughout the session, is how you can use some of these Unstuck resources, kind of no matter what kind of uncertainty you're experiencing, and also how you can use some of them online or virtually. So if you have a student who is home in quarantine, or hopefully this isn't happening to any of you, your whole school shuts down, your whole classroom shuts down for a small period of time, you can keep going with Unstuck with these online fillable resources. So you're going to be hearing a lot about that along the way. In the chat, Gary has put a link to a fillable Go Why Plan Do Check, although it's just actually Go Why Plan. For this one, if you want to grab it quickly out of Google. Oh, sorry, Gary. If when people join, they can't see the previous things. And those of you who are just joining, please put in the chat for us where you're from. That's really helpful for us to kind of get a sense of who we've got in the room. Okay, so you can, if you go click on this link from the chat, that's an easy to get resource. All of the materials have been switched during COVID to fillable PDFs online. So we'll tell you more about that as we go. So let me just give you the overview, if we go to the next slide, of what we're going to be talking about today. In terms of helpful for in general to avoid overload, but right now we need to kind of remember how much everybody's dealing with COVID, and also just everything that goes along with it. So we're going to go quickly through how to avoid overload, or some kind of tips and tricks, and please also share your own. Generally in these kinds of coaching sessions, I learn from you all, the my boots on the ground frontline people. So it's really helpful if you can also share your experiences and successes with each other. Really helpful. We're going to run through how you can apply Plan A, Plan B to uncertain times. And then Monica is going to take us through the feelings chain. Some of you may have gotten to that already in the curriculum, but if not, then you're going to get a nice overview. And how you can use scripts like expect the unexpected and what resources we have available for you. And then after we go through just 20 slides, we're already on number 3, then we're going to open it up for your questions or discussion. And it doesn't have to be focused on this topic. If you have something else you want to ask us related to Unstuck, then please feel free to unmute and tell us what you're struggling with, or also tell us what you're having success with too. We do like to hear that too, working on that praise ratio. So first, next I'm going to show you a graph about overload in general. And if you've been through the training, which you probably have, because that's probably how you heard about this coaching session, so I'm going to assume that you did, you might remember Carter, who was our first case study. And poor little Carter has most problems, right? So like if there's an executive functioning domain, Carter was our person who had, was our kiddo who had almost all of the difficulties. So we're going to talk about Carter here in terms of overload. So if you look kind of, there's the bottom, across the bottom is time, and Carter before lunch starts out pretty happy, low stress. And then he goes to lunch. Lunch is really noisy and loud and kind of overstimulating, and his stress level goes up just a little bit, but he's still sort of in the blue zone there, not too much stress. And then after lunch and after his teacher corrected him, which Carter doesn't like many of us, after he got scolded, he then kind of being primed from that noisy lunch, he's then kind of overwhelmed, upset, overloaded. And what that looks like is after she scolds him, he's looking more upset. He's feeling more anxious. He might have a meltdown, or he might not be able to solve problems. He is overloaded, right? So he is beyond, he's in the red and not able to learn even or respond to the teacher's suggestions for, getting it together. And once he's kind of hit that peak, for Carter, it takes a long time for him to recover. So he needs some pretty serious time to go by without any more demands before he can be ready to learn again and be back kind of down in that lower right-hand corner of your screen, the happy face again. But it's not only limited to Carter. So the next graph is going to show what happens to that teacher in the classroom when Carter gets overloaded. So the teacher is that second graph there, the lower graph. And we see happening is contagion, right? And we don't often think about emotions being contagious, but I'm a psychologist, it's kind of my thing. And if you don't believe that this is really how things go, think about like you and your love partner finally get a date out, and maybe it's been a while. And you go to this great restaurant that you've been looking forward to, and the people next to you are splitting up and fighting about their kids. And you can hear them because they are right next to you in this fancy, quiet restaurant. And what happens to you? So you don't even know these people, but that stress, you can probably feel it in some way in your body. Or you maybe feel it in your conversation, like all of a sudden you don't know what to say to this person that you were so looking forward to going out on a date with, right? And that's really an example of, of emotions being contagious. And overwhelm is contagious too, because once Carter gets overloaded, he's a mess, right? Like maybe he's kicking chairs or he's yelling, screaming. He's definitely, because he's Carter, he's definitely being defiant. And you might remember from the case study, when he's overloaded, it's always out loud. And then it's really contagious. It's not only contagious to the other kids, but it's contagious to the teacher, because she's the one who's responsible for kind of keeping all the kids safe and for helping Carter get things back together. So in research, when we have looked at how contagious things like overwhelm is, we see this pattern. So teachers are generally better than kids at regulating, and maybe they don't get quite as overloaded, but it does mean it's still hard to get through the class. So what we're hoping to offer with these next few scenarios are things that can help you or your fellow teachers when you're kind of having this contagion of overwhelm. Like maybe even just for you as a teacher, it's number 532 of the day where you've had to be flexible and try to come up with some other way to teach your kids. You know, the bus driver didn't show, or so your kids are all coming late and hungry, or the technology is not working, or your kids have to stay home, so you need to be teaching remotely, or whatever, right? Like it's just kind of endless these days. So these are kind of scenarios that we're going to run through really quickly to give you some ideas of how you can help manage your own overload and then manage also your students' overload. So the first thing we're going to reference is can't, not, won't. And that is really figuring out, right, whether if it's overload, for example, then punishing or scolding is not going to work. Jennifer, I love your dog. I'm so glad you have the camera on. Please, please don't turn it off. It's just warming my soul. Sorry. You're not all on my screen. So if there are other furry bits on the screen, I just want you to know, please leave your cameras on. I love to see them. So this teacher is maybe feeling a little bit concerned about the student who's not doing anything in class, and they think they look really stuck. Maybe he can't because he's overwhelmed. So it's not a won't. And the teacher says, you look stuck. Can we make a plan B? Do you feel like you could do 2 problems instead of all 8, or do you need a break? So offering different plan Bs there, because this teacher is understanding that this student is probably not wanting at the moment, right? Maybe the student's overwhelmed and can't get started on the problems. So next we're going to talk about talk less, write it down, and break it down. So those are 2 other techniques that you've heard about. And so this teacher reasonably asked the student to write a paragraph. That's the assignment for the day. They're in writing or language arts. And it's not an outrageous request, of course, but the student can't do it. So you kind of get little hints that the student is feeling overwhelmed, you know, the hands on the head. And I do that too, kind of frequently. And so this teacher says, like, all I've asked for is him to write a paragraph, but he's just done. So luckily, the teacher, instead of kind of losing their cool, decides to write things down and break down the task. right? So number one is a quick coping strategy, take a deep breath, or a quick reset strategy, depending on what language you're using. Then write all of your ideas in any order for 5 minutes, and then take a break and show me. So instead of write a paragraph, it's do these 3 things and then check back in with me. So that's an example of both talk less, write more, and break it down. So the next thing to reduce overload, and this works always for all of us, home and work, make it predictable as much as you can and reduce stimulation. So one of the first things you need to do to make it predictable is include the changes, like if the music teacher is out that day or covering another school, or there's a change to the schedule, then you insert that into the already predictable structure of a posted schedule. So you see it up there beside the board, which is great. It's already there. When there's a change, if you, instead of kind of, dealing with it at the moment when the change happens, from the morning, if you know the change is coming, of course, then you post it there in the system that is already making the classroom much more predictable for the students, right? So you just kind of include it as it's as part of that prediction strategy that you're using, or that visual strategy. And then the reduced stimulation, that is also something that is that you work on in advance. So this photo of the beanbag chair is in a corner of the classroom with dim lights. Maybe there's no overhead lights. They've got headphones, noise canceling headphones available to shut out the noise, or you can also use earplugs, although most kids hate them. So this isn't something you can set up in the moment when Carter is already upset, right? But let's say you feel Carter's tension growing, and then instead of scolding Carter, you say, Carter, can you go take a break? Can you go take a break on the beanbag chair? I've seen kids also who take a break with a beanbag chair by lying down under a big table and putting the beanbag chair on top of them. So whatever works for Carter. So it's kind of introducing something that Carter's already familiar with, that you have set up in the classroom, and introducing it at a time when you can maybe divert from that peak in overload. Okay, I've got one more quick example. You've maybe, because they're pretty early on, you've probably already seen that there are coping strategies, and you've hopefully identified some with the students. This one is an example of including a breathing strategy, but not as part of Unstuck, just as a part of like everyday math class. So we have seen this really all over the country, kind of just being incorporated as a matter of a new routine. So even if they're not doing Unstuck in math class, which they're probably not, this teacher says, okay, let's start math by practicing a coping strategy, or the teacher might say by doing a box breath. And so it's just, you get your bag, or you get your math book, and then we start by taking a deep breath and holding it and letting it out. So it doesn't actually take time, really, to do box breathing takes under 60 seconds, especially because I've got little lungs. So it's just something that kind of acts as a reset and to transition away from whatever it is they're coming from, and into the new math class with a calm expectation. And if it's an everyday part of the routine, the kids will just do it and experience that reset, and then hopefully avoid some of that overload because they're starting out at a lower place, even if it's after lunch for Carter. Okay.
Thanks, Laura. I think the idea too here is that we kind of think that we're all starting in the low part of the curve. But I think with all of the turbulence right now, a lot of people are actually sitting at a much more, their baseline is much more elevated. And it's something that we really want to be thinking about. Unstuck has a lot of downloadable stuff you can find on the Unstuck and on Target website. We have links. This is actually from the website. You can get the code. Brooks, our publisher, has a download hub. So please use those resources. What we're hoping is that you may want to, which is why we're giving you links right now, you may want to do for a specific situation, workshop or do a GWP, a goal-wide plan, do check together about something that's going on in your classroom. So I want to preview what the feelings chain, and we're also going to drop another link into the chat here. The feelings chain is a really nice way to review a situation that ran amok. But the power in the feelings chain really has an awful lot to do with how you do it. There's a real danger of only trotting things out when things are really, really terrible. And then having especially if we're in that part of the curve where we're a little escalated too, that it sounds punitive or scolding. And we really want to stay away from that to the maximum extent we can. It's another really great thing about practicing as a part of a routine, different calming strategies, is that when you don't just trot it out when somebody's upset. They've already practiced it, they know how to do it, they know how to manage it. So we're going to go through a couple of scenarios that I dreamed up. And how you would use goal-wide plan, do check, and how you might use the feelings chain with the student in a situation. So substitutes are often a hot button issue for a lot of students. And I think it's something that a lot of teachers, a lot of substitutes would be deeply grateful for a plan in advance. And it would help really and a lot of parents, I think, would be grateful too, because they're not going to get the phone call for when a sub is coming. And, you know, it's a situation that children, they don't like to think about it, but they kind of know it does eventually happen at some point. And so, you know, we would tell them that the goal for this child who maybe is an eloper, who runs from the room when he really is upset about something, is that, you know, maybe the goal is to stay calm when they have an unexpected substitute. Now, that's probably not a highly motivating goal for a kid. Like, that's not really going to speak to them. So we want to really think about what the child's why is there. And it might be to remind them that they actually like being in class with friends, which many kids do, and that you might even need to put some kind of external motivator in there. You know, collaborating with families on how they can manage this can be a powerful way to do it. So get an ice cream when I come home. I think what's also interesting is to think that sometimes the student goal and the student why is different from the teacher goal and the teacher why. What's important about goal-wide plan, do check is that we're always talking to the child's goal and the child's why. But I want you to know you're thinking about what your goal is also. You're part of this equation. So the plan here might be, and you can read this, so I'm not going to read it all out to you, but what I think is really important is that we're teaching a child to sort of self-advocate and say that they have a need as the plan A, right? And that they can even use language like, I hate substitutes, right? Now, don't forget, your sub has this in their subfolder, right? So they're prepared to have this child say something with strong emotion, but there is a plan, right? And there's several plans here. And the first one is kind of optimal, right? You practice it with the child, you might role play it and say, you know, you can say, okay, you hate unexpected things, okay. And you could say, you know, how would you say that? And they can tell you, and you can write it down exactly like that. But he has a plan, and the teacher asks the plan, the part of the plan, maybe the teacher spends 5 minutes talking to the child. Like, what do you like? What are you interested in, right? And then you notice that plans should be specific. A lot of our children, if they ask you what you like, 20 minutes later and your ears are bleeding, you're still hearing what they like. So we're telling this child here 3 sentences, right? And then the teacher shares something, and they share maybe a secret signal for when they start getting overloaded. This could set a whole different tone to the day. Can you see where that would be the case? We're not Pollyanna. You can see a version where the teacher says, hey, I see you have a go wipe plan do check for when you have a sub, right? And the child is still at a 4 or 5 on the feelings target, and she can tell, and the child goes to the calming corner. Maybe that beanbag is on top of him again. And now the sub knows what to do, but the child also knows what's going to happen. So now this really unpredictable person, the sub, becomes a little predictable. So, and then we know that plan C may be that they do leave the room. And one of the things that I always say about when you have a runner is give them someplace to run to, right? And reward that they landed in that spot, okay? So it's not as great as if he had done plan A or plan B, right? But you want to let the teacher know the kid's on their way. He knows to run to the principal's office. You need to let the sub know to warn the principal's office he's on his way down, right? And the principal probably will know what to do at that point. So that's an example of a GWPDC. And you would work this all in advance with the child, you know, someday when you have a calm moment, right? A few days after a meltdown when there was a sub. So let's go to how you might use the feelings chain, though, to introduce this. And so I'm going to sort of be the teacher and introduce this to you as if you guys were the students. And, you know, I might say, I hear you had a rough time when you had a sub last week, right? Sounds like that was really hard for you. And, you know, the kid's probably gonna be like, yeah, I hate subs, right? Okay. Yeah, that sounds really hard. So it seems like there was this big event, which is that you saw the sub and you said you hate subs. So what, do you have feelings words for that? And they might come up with, oh, I was really angry, sad, worried, right? And be like, oh, wow, where were you on the feelings target? And they were at a 4 or 5, my guess, especially if they ran out of the room, right? So you can help them. Oh, so you're being very empathetic and validating. You want their experience to be heard, that this is what happened, right? And so you ran out of the classroom yelling. Ooh, wow, okay. So, you know, how did others feel, do you think, when that happened? It probably, I'm guessing, now here's one of the important things about this. A lot of, especially kids on the spectrum, really don't know how others felt. They literally, you know, they really don't know. And you can actually give them a gift. If you say to a kid, how do you think that made others feel? And they say, I don't know, believe them. They don't know. And you might want to say to them, well, you know, I think the sub was really worried. And I think the kid whose soda you knocked on the way out or water bottle you knocked on the way out was probably pretty upset and angry, right? So that it was kind of tough for a lot of other people, right? And what happened next, right? And he's like, well, the sub was running after me down the hall and, you know, people were yelling and the students were saying, you know, Johnny does that all the time, ignore him, right? And you're like, ooh, that sounds kind of rough. I know you don't like it when everyone's talking about you, right? And it's no fun. Ooh, being chased, yuck, that's bad, right? And I said, I'm wondering how you were feeling when all that was happening, right? And he might then add embarrassed to the list, right? But he's still a number 4. He's running down the hall. And you'd be like, so it sounds like that didn't work out very well for you. Sounds like you were feeling pretty rotten by the end of that. So after you've had this kind of empathetic debrief, you can say in your next one, which is next slide, please. Which is, you know, I wonder if we could make a plan B for this. I wonder if there's another way we can do it. And so you're still going to see the sub because that's not, you know, the sub is there. right? And you're probably still going to feel angry and sad and worried. And you might even be at a number 4, right? But, you know, I wonder if you paused for just a minute and took a deep breath, use one of our strategies, and maybe hand the teacher a GWPDC we can do in advance, or would you like me to put one in her folder? Right? And you can tell her you hate subs. That's okay. You can talk to her. How do you think that's going to make her feel? Like, what do you think she's going to feel when she sees that? And I don't know, right? I just told her I hate that. People don't like it when I tell them I hate things. Well, you know, actually, they're going to think you're a pretty good self-advocate. They might think they might be surprised that a child is like really out there with a plan, right? And, you know, teachers were kind of ready to help. So now we know what to do to help. So I bet you they'll be ready to help. And then let's talk about what's going to happen next. You love Pokemon. And the next thing on your plan is she's going to ask you what you like. And you're going to get to talk about Pokemon. So how do you think that's going to feel? And, you know, maybe we can get to safe and optimistic at a level 2, right? But do you see how this was all very collaborative, very like there's no, we really try to take the judgment out of this. We try to stay with the empathy and stay with the overload, and that there's always a solution in another plan. And then the advantage here, really what we're helping here with the feelings chain is to link how other people feel so that they realize that the impact of their behavior on their choices and their situation. Make sense, everybody? Okay, so that's the common sub. You could substitute in there a change in the lunch menu, the library is closed. There's a lot of different versions of that, right? I know that we're seeing here, and it's beginning to decrease, but we're having an awful lot of people who are sick with COVID, and a lot of the students that I'm seeing right now are really worried, right? Especially when it's an older person. They're beginning to get the message that maybe that older people are more vulnerable in a big way. And so this might be, you know, to manage your feelings and feel a little safer when somebody close to you gets COVID, because that feels really scary, right? And the why is that COVID's scary, and it's important to remember that adults are there to help you, right? Offering them a cookie in this situation isn't going to work so well, right? We need to be offering them some emotional relief from this feeling they're having. And this is another way, another set of plans that you can, that, you know, I've dreamed up, right? Of how you could respond to the teacher. And one of the things that I think is important about these plans is that often they really do need to be specific. So if I'm going to, you know, are you going to email, text, FaceTime? When is that going to happen, right? Who's going to be there? Who's going to facilitate it, right? Making it really concrete is a really important part of the plan. And then making the other things they're worried about. So let's say their friend is the one who isn't there, and that's who they always sit with at lunch. You may need to make a plan very specifically. I'm going to sit at this table with this person for lunch, right? But remember, we're always thinking about these kids, where they are on that curve, because once they start getting past the just right, they start moving very quickly into can't territory. All right, and then next, we can just go through the same thing on the feelings chain, right? Which is that it's really, you know, you're angry, sad, and worried, and you could have a big meltdown about it. And it's understandable, you're angry, sad, and worried, right? Others, though, around you might feel kind of annoyed and angry because it's so totally disruptive. And then the consequences, you don't know how long this is going to go on. You have no more information. At the end of the tantrum, you literally have no more information than at the beginning of the tantrum to help you. You have no plan. So tantrum's a bad word. I'm editing myself at the end of the meltdown. And there's a real difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. A meltdown is a can't, right? A meltdown is because they got overloaded and they just couldn't do it anymore and just neurologically exploded. All right. So the problem is at the end of that, you are still upset, angry, and worried at a number 4. And that is not a good place to live. And I often will say to a child, like, was your goal to be upset, angry, and worried at a 4? I've never had a kid say, yes, that was my goal. Right. And, I don't think that was your goal. And by the way, how you ask that question is really important. Can you see if you ask it, well, was that your goal to be at a 4 of angry, upset, and worried? You can see they would be like, well, yeah. Right. But if you're asking it empathetically, they actually really start to, they get it. Right. I don't think that's where you wanted to end up, was it? That wasn't your goal, was it? So in the next slide, what's important is that we give them a different plan. We help them with the coping strategy, the whole 9 yards. And at the end, they might still be worried and sad. Okay. We are not in the business of taking all this stuff. We can't fix all this stuff, but it's less intense. And that's what the Feelings Target is always trying to do too, is that getting things down to a lower intensity lets you better able to manage the world around you, to make a plan B, to do better. So I think that's pretty close to okay, can we have the next slide? What I want you to also think about is in your practice, like in classrooms, when you're talking about if you want to do an extra exercise, we have all been living one big plan A, B, C, D. I don't even know what we're at this point, right? And it might be on any day we've run through the alphabet. So I think what we can do is actually let the children see what flexible problem solvers they have been, right? They have flexed so much. And let's just celebrate that. Their flexibility. We often tend to, they're so busy being labeled as stuck or rigid or whatever it is we want to label them as. And when in fact, I think our children have been remarkably flexible. Not always because they've had a choice, but they've done it, right? And then ask them for different plans that they've made in different situations that were unexpected. And so the last slide, what I want to talk about here is that given that what Laura started is that expecting the unexpected is a key script for our kids right now. And the real answer to the way to expect the unexpected is to be ready to make a plan B, right? Or a plan C. And one of the things is that I think this is a perfect example to model that all of us are struggling with managing the unexpected. Children are not alone in struggling with these feelings. These are grownups are doing this too, right? And that actually it's not just them that wants things to be predictable, because we often say like, well, children have to have a routine, right? Well, we kind of all like routine. It really makes us much happier, much more comfortable. And one of the things that I've done a lot with students that I work with and children that I've been working with now is showing as many YouTube videos as I can get my hands on of unexpected events. And the funnier and the more ridiculous, the better, right? I have a YouTube, so on Unstuck and Untarget is a YouTube channel, and I have videos on there. And one of them is of a dog falling asleep in his bowl of water. I'm not kidding you. Unexpected. He stands up and he falls asleep again in his bowl of water. Right? If you can't giggle at this dog by the end of it, but we could say like, boy, that dog did not expect that bowl of water to be there the first, second, or third time, right? And he had to make a plan B every time. So we wanted just sort of normalizing this, laughing a little bit with it really does help. And so as my last tip for teaching Unstuck, one of the things that I recommend is we do have these videos online, and I have these Nearpod lessons that I put up that I had to deliver Unstuck during the pandemic virtually. It was a nightmare. Well, it actually turned out, I thought it was going to be a nightmare. It turned out to be delightful. But I created these lessons and I put lots of videos in the lessons with pauses where you might ask something. And it turns out that a lot of implementers are now using some of those videos in their classes. And, you know, we all know the sure way to get a kid is show them a video, right? That's pretty much a home run. So I thought I would pass those on to you as a shortcut to make your lives a little easier. All right, I think that's it. Just a reminder of where you can get the materials, and now we are yours. So problems, challenges, things you wish were easier.
I have had challenges with, we only have a certain amount of time. And for me as a social worker, typically doing social emotional behavioral learning for our kiddos in the classroom, we're given about 30 minutes. And I'm noticing the executive functioning, at least for us in our school, is really behind. And the kiddos getting these concepts is taking some time to do. So it's not a lesson in a half an hour. It's usually taking that lesson, and that lesson might take a couple of times to do, and then going back even the next time as we review. I love the lightning rounds, are great. However, still having trouble with the working memory. Okay, what did we just talk about last session? Oh, we talked about our feelings, and we talked about how we would use strategies, you know, those kinds of things. Because I think I'm on lesson 7. And so that's been a struggle with that, and hopefully, you know, as far as time management, when I was planning, I am having to be flexible in that it's not just one lesson.
I think that's fair. And one of the things, we had a wonderful discussion among the authors today, you know, whatever you need to do to make it work for the students you're working with will make Unstuck work. You know, whatever language we're talking about, you know, how faithful do you have to be to the letter of the curriculum? Not very. Laura, what did we land on was the perfect phrasing?
You can't mess it up.
That's
really.
it.
So, you know, one of the things, Crystal, like if you're feeling pressure, like, oh, I'm not going to get to all of it. I also want you to know in our trials, when there were schools that were just not able to keep up the pace or started really, really late and so couldn't get through all of it, we did not see a difference in outcomes for the students. So I think, you know, what is the most important thing for you all to do, like in the room with the students, is just give them what they need at that time. And if you decide I need to spend 5 sessions on lesson 7, I don't actually remember off the top of my head what lesson 7 is, but if that's where you are, then you're doing what your kids need. Like that's what they need. And that's how Unstuck works best. So if you need to say pause, we've got to jump ahead, or we've got to go back and, you know, go back to do another coping skills investigation, or go over this feelings target one more time because we're having a hard time identifying and noticing what we're feeling. However you use it, it's still helping the kids, and that's our ultimate goal. So the pressure for not finishing, you just get a get out of guilt-free card here from us. Like it is really okay. And the most important thing is that you don't push forth with the students who aren't ready to keep going, and really listen to them and give them what they need. Does that help, Crystal?
It does. Thank you. Because I was feeling pressure and putting pressure on myself. Oh my gosh, this is a pilot program. I'm supposed to be doing this. This is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm finding myself, I am kind of, I am adjusting some things. So, you know, we only get so many copies. And I personally am doing 4 classes. So 2 4th grade classes and 2 5th grade classes for Unstuck and On Target every week. And so I'm not necessarily making the copies. I say, like, for homework practice, I want you guys to go home and have this discussion with your parents, because then I'm not making, 200 copies. Is that stuff okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. But you can also, if this is helpful, if you go to that downloadable website, so it's on page IX of your manual. It's free. There's a little code in there you have to put in to tell them who you are and put in the code. And then all of those classroom practices and all of those home practices are electronic. So if you want to put them in Schoology or whatever you use, or email them, I mean, it would be harder, I think, to email every single family, but you can put them all together. You can download them. You can put them on your website and say, hey, click on this folder. Then you don't have to do the work of copying anyway. And if the parents don't want it, that's totally fine. But if they do, it saves trees, and hopefully, most importantly, it saves you some work. So those are all available there for you.
So Crystal, I'm actually putting together what we were calling in the last group that was requested, Unstuck in a Box, right? Which is to reduce the prep time for you guys, where I'm actually putting all the things you need to laminate are in one document. You print it once, you throw it all in the laminator, you cut it up, and then I took pictures of my Unstuck in a Box. So those instructions are almost ready to go. The other thing is I put all the parent handouts into one PDF document. I did not, actually. Somebody else wonderful did. But so that you can just send them all at one time if you want, right? Home to the parents. And the same for the teacher handouts, though I would love it if we could get communication, because the environment in the school for generalization is really powerful. The other thing that I want to encourage you is that in an educational setting, there's a lot of emphasis always for us on achieving mastery before we go to the next concept. That is not a thing in Unstuck, in my view. This is a spiraling curriculum, and it comes back to concepts over and over and over. And so, one way you can see, look, I took a highly manualized curriculum that we like opened veins to write every word of, and blew it up into 12 sessions, right, on Nearpod. And I cannot tell you how magnificently the children in these groups did, right? And so I want to just tell you, so you can look for inspiration, ways to review. Sometimes, at this stage, reviewing by having them generate, making them more closed, like multiple choice, right? If you're on the feelings target at a 5, which emoji are you, right? Head exploding, or right? Or smiley face. Just limit things down, and that you're going to keep seeing this stuff come up over and over and over again. And that might help you also move forward, because it's also frustrating having to modify and get stuck on any one lesson for too long, because that's not good for you either. So if your kids are stuck on something and it's not resonating, fine, move on, right? So is that another get out of guilt free card? And if you get stuck, one of the things is that all of the authors are available. And that's why we're doing these coaching sessions. And you get stuck, email. We'll be on the phone with you faster than you know it hit us. We love schools. We're doing these observations in schools, and we were asking in a meeting for volunteers. And it was funny to me how fast people were raising their hands. We never raise our hands to volunteer for things. To get to watch or to, be in schools, we love seeing you guys do your work. So we're here to help, really. And you'll get an email when I get this Unstuck in a Box finished, because I have it almost done.
Very nice. Thank you.
Other questions?
I just had a really quick question. This might be dumb, but on the GWPDC, I've done it with a couple different groups, and we've always kind of struggled on what to put under the do. Is that like you do this plan and it's like, okay, now go out and do it. Like, what do they put there? Is it just, I don't know.
That's a great question.
Good observation.
I know. I have to admit, I was really stumped by that myself the first time I'm sitting down with a kid and doing it. So the really like super easy way to include it is to say right in there, try it out, try the plan, or you can even just put a check mark. Yep, I did it. They don't have to put anything in there. And then the check is just, did it work? Like, yep, worked. Nope, didn't work. Start over. Okay. Does that make sense?
That does. And then like there's one kiddo, when you said you don't have to do it to mastery, I probably did it to overkill. Because one student, we've done so many of the GWPDC plans that today we were in group and I always give them a snack in group and we're running low. And I was like, oh, I need to remember to get more snacks. And the kid said, you should do a GWPDC.
Oh.
Wow.
That's great.
So we just took a pause and I was like, let's do it. So it was just like, oh my word, like they're getting it. It was really exciting to see. And this was a kid who like, prior to this group, everything was boring. He would come, this is boring. And he's really like motivated. So I'm just loving this. So
that's awesome. It could be your snacks too, though. That could
be. He wanted to say for that.
That's great. It was a really great question. Thank you.
Well, I think if you need anything from us, you have ideas for other kinds of coaching sessions you would like us to do. We do have some more topics coming up that we think that we've heard from teachers, but let us know, right? We're here and we're just so thrilled for you to be doing this. And I think, the payoff is when we see a kid saying, I think one of my favorite moments as an educator was a kid looking at me as he was running down the hall saying, I need a plan B, right? And I was like, that's it, because he sure as hell does, right? But that was it. He knew that there was going to be a solution at the end of that hallway. And I just think it's really powerful. So I
want to say thank you to all of you who are doing this in the second worst school year in the history of schools. That might be a slight overstatement, but not really.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I think it's really, really terrific that you all are hanging with us and hanging with your students. And one thing I can tell you, just in my own life, in my kids' lives, and at work, everybody is having more executive function struggles over the last couple of years. So, I have patients who are surgeons. And just because everything is so different now, like all of their supports and things have kind of fallen apart and they have to do stuff that they never had to plan to do before. And so, it's not just our kids who are struggling, it's really all of us. And that overload does, it can touch us all. I'm so grateful that you're all a part of this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, go relax and get ready to do it all over again tomorrow, right?